Okay, we are here in Urbana's third oldest park, Carl Park. Have you seen the statue of Lincoln over there?
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it with this shiny nose. That's how come I got to know where this place was.
Would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Yes. My name is Anne Lutomia. I am an international student here. I'm doing my doctoral studies. I'm from Kenya. And I'm a novice poet. I love poetry, and of late I've started writing a lot of poems. Apart from that, I'm just interested in many things that I infuse into my poetry. I'm interested in social issues, life, people, spirituality, out of space experiences, just everything here. And I'm also looking back into my childhood and life, and all these things that I'm interested in getting infused into my poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder if you would read the poem about the gizzards.
Yeah.
I remember reading that and thinking that was a fine poem.
Yes. This poem is interesting because, yes, it looks at family, but it also puts me at, it looks at myself as this transnational woman and the affordances I get, and how I can stand and look at my culture and how it's changing. I like this poem because I published it with the Journal of Gender a while ago. I had been thinking about it for years because I came to the US, now it's 15 years, and the first week I came to the US, I started eating this part of a chicken called the gizzard. I had 2 Kenyan roommates, and we bought it every week, and we ate a lot of it. And it's interesting that I'm talking about eating it because at home we never ate it. I am from Kenya, and I come from the Luya community, and women are not allowed to eat gizzards. So this is what intrigued my thoughts, and I got to write it I was writing it 12 years after living in the US. Yeah, so I'll read it. It's my turn to eat the gizzard. Grandma never ate it. Mama never ate it. Aunt never ate it, but I eat it. Women are not supposed to eat it. Only men can eat it. They take turns to eat it. If Baba is not around to eat it, Brother One will eat it. If Brother One is not around to eat it, Brother Two will eat it. If Brother Two is not around to eat it, Brother Three will eat it. If Brother Four is not around to eat it, Brother Five will eat it. My turn to eat it will never come, but in faraway towns and cities it comes. I can buy, cook it, and then eat it. I can order it and eat it. I can eat it in private and in public spaces. I can eat it anywhere and everywhere. This delicacy that I'm forbidden to eat, crunchy and tasty it is. Finally, it's my turn to eat it. It's my turn to eat the gizzard.
It's very nice.
Yeah.
Do you feel that writing poetry is a political thing, a sort of task or a labor that you intend, like writing a dissertation, to have some meaning in the world, or is it a spiritual practice for you? Is it something you do as a meditation?
Yeah, I do all of that. For me, I write political poems. I write some because I'm at a spiritual space, and I also write some because I want to interrogate some tension that I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it becomes a space for doing all that. And you're right, it's also for me a craft that I'm doing intellectual work, just like my dissertation. Indeed, I've seen myself, when I get the dissertation writing blockade, I write my poems, on different issues. Sometimes I've turned on NPR and I listen to some issue on BBC, and it triggers my poetry writing. Yeah, I've lived for a long time in Orchard Downs, which is next to the Japanese garden, and sometimes I go for a walk and I'm inspired about what I want to write, even environmental issues. When I wake up in the morning and I'm hearing the chirping of the birds, I could write something about that, So yeah, poetry hits on so many levels of my life as a human being. Yeah, yeah.
Talk to us about the word you use, trigger. Trigger has kind of a negative connotation these days, but you say something triggers the poem. Talk to us about how it goes from being, say, a bird song to a line on a piece of paper?
Oh yeah. So yeah, trigger here. I'm using it as a metaphor for this nice. It can be any sentiment that comes out of you being at a place and something happening, and then you start thinking about these issues. So for me, what happens with my poetry is that I have a notebook that I write my poetry in, and immediately I start. I'm say inspired by a butterfly, or I'm inspired by birds. I write it, even if I'm lying in my bed. I start writing it, and yeah, I put it in my pen and in my book. And I took poetry as a child in Kenya in standard in standard 4, which would be elementary school, the 4th year. And I liked poetry here. So then we're just repeating what the teacher is saying. By the time we go to 6th, 7th, 8th, we're learning, we're seeing various poems by British people in the Commonwealth. And when we go to high school now, we're learning styles of poems. So I kind of go to learn of onomatopoeia, simile. So all these mechanics of poems. Yes, so I go to learn them. And I'm also inspired by the fact that I speak other languages. So I speak Swahili and I write poems in Swahili and French. And when I took French, I read some poems in French. So I also rely on those styles that I've seen people write in those languages. And when I'm putting it down, I'm inspired by that. But when I did poetry in high school, I did not, for example, interface with, say, tanka or the Japanese style of writing poetry. So I kind of like to playfully learn that. I've not honed that, but I like to play with that because they're short and they push you to think about what you're putting down, because you have to listen to their sounds, So yes, then when I write down and I read it to myself. And sometimes when I'm excited about my poem, I send it to a friend of mine who is my sounding board, and sometimes she doesn't say anything much. Sometimes she's excited about it. What kind of excites me about poetry sometimes is when I have a task to do. Say there's a journal that requires a poem, and therefore they tell you that, we're going to be publishing around this issue, so I have to put my thoughts around it. For example, I have a poem about African women and robots that I wrote, and it was inspired by the fact that BUA, which is from the George Soros Foundation in South Africa, wanted us to write poems around women and work, African women and work. So I study human resource development, so I understand what's going on in the world around work, the way with artificial intelligence work is shifting. So I understand work and performance and the way work is shifting. So that influenced my writing. So in my writing, I interface the rural woman in Africa and the woman who lives in the city and is working, and how they do their work and care for their work. And if they were to be replaced by a robot, what would happen? And I was also showing the little nuances of what these women do that is not visible.
What would you say makes you an African versus American poet?
I think I play on both grounds. Yeah, there are things I write that are American, like in the winter I like to observe. I've written a poem, I don't have it here, around the winters of Illinois, how they've changed and how they impede our movement sometimes. But they're beautiful, so I write that. But I'm still thinking of whether I want to brand myself as an African poet, or whether I want to take to be on both ends, because I've spent 15 years here, and this is where I've written most of my poems. So they're kind of tied to my memories of home, but also I write poems about my experience in the U.S. The weather, the people that I experienced, the food, everything. And
I think the gizzard poem shows that very well.
So I try to tap on these two worlds that I've lived in. So when I'm writing for the African audience, then I do like the journals I was writing in that journal, BUA. I'm writing for for consumption on the African continent, then I'll write it that way. In the U.S., it tends to be there's more people that you can speak to,
Right.
so therefore I open it up to my African experience and my American experience, even global experience. Yeah.
How do you know when a poem is ready to send out to the world?
Yeah. I sometimes I feel it. I feel that this is just enough. I have this gut feeling that this is enough, and I like what I'm reading, And sometimes I've got sounding boards. I send it to this particular friend of mine has read all my poems, so she's like, "Yeah, this sounds good. You might want to tweak this word." I've been flexible of late. I'm also married to my words. Yeah,
Right.
So I tweak. And sometimes I tweak over. There's some I've not published. So over the years, I keep on changing some aspects of the lines here. But for me, I rely on my gut feelings and the rules that I've just read about poems. If I'm playing around with a haiku, once I feel that I've done the 5-7-5,
Right.
and then I know this is it. And sometimes I can even visualize it. What image do I want to portray out there? Then I feel, this is right. Yeah.
Is there a difference between English and Swahili in terms of the rhythmic patterns that the language gives itself to? Like in the English language, we have the various kinds of meter. So the iambic pentameter is ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. That's kind of the basic one. Is there something similar to that poets in Swahili would listen for and try to create?
Yes, it's the poetry. The Swahili is an old language with old poetry. Borrowed. Some of it was they think of poetry in Swahili but write in Arabic, but you write there. It can be like ta ta ta, comma, then ta ta ba. There are many patterns where it can be the inside that looks alike and then the outside is different, or you can have them the same pattern, or it can be outside, or it can be the bottom line can be the one that is different. So there are many styles. There's styles where there's two lines, 3 lines, 4 lines. Yeah, then there's the free verse too. Yeah, but it's a very interesting language to write in, and it's also helped me to, when I'm working on the haiku, or when I'm starting to understand more the English way of writing poetry. So my roots in Swahili really, and the structure that is there enables me to understand the structure in English writing, and then Japanese
That's very
style.
interesting.
Yeah.
We know so little about language in other countries, I think,
Yeah.
and the poetry that those languages produce.
Yeah.
So one last question for you.
Yes.
50 years in the future, what do you want to be remembered as, a poet or a scholar? That's an unfair question.
As both. As both. In the next 2 years, I'd like to publish my own poetry book. And I'd like to do more poetry work. I'd like to write my poems in English, Swahili, French, and Luya. And also be a scholar. When I finish my PhD, even my dissertation, I'm infusing in some poetry. So I'm always straddling both worlds. Yes, I love poetry. I forgot to tell you this. My uncles used to write from when I was 6, 7, 8, and 9. My uncles would write to the national radio station their poems. They were in Swahili, and on Friday we'd listen to the poems, and they say, "You have to listen to my poem. I've written a poem." And that also, it's kind of made me to like poems, because people in the family were writing poems, and they were being read on the national TV, national radio.
Right.
Yeah, I grew up with the time of radio, so I still listen to a lot of radio.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, Anne, it's very great pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you
and
too.
Talk
Will.
to you for a while. I hope that we can cross paths in the poetry community more frequently.
I feel very pleased to be interviewed by a poet laureate in the community. I hope to be one day.